Dory number 1. The last delivery on Vela Road. The door was already open when Marcus arrived. Not cracked, not ajar. Open. Swung wide into darkness like a mouth that had been waiting all evening for exactly this moment, and the smell that rolled out of it hit him before he even made it up the porch steps. Not rot, not garbage. Something older than that. Something that smelled like a basement that hadn't seen light in decades, like wet stone and copper pennies, and something sweetly chemical underneath, the kind of smell that bypasses your nose entirely and plugs directly into the part of your brain that only speaks one language. Leave. Marcus didn't leave. He was 23 years old, working his second job 6 nights a week at Dominic's Pizza on Route 9 in Clarksville, Tennessee, and he needed the tips. He told himself that every time his instincts fired wrong at a delivery. He told himself that when the dog behind a screen door showed all its teeth and made no sound. He told himself that when a customer answered the door in clothing that was soaking wet at 2 in the morning. He was practical. He was sensible. He needed the tips. He knocked on the open door's frame anyway and called out, "Hello, pizza delivery? Order for Hargrove?" The darkness inside the house did not answer. But something shifted in it. Not movement exactly, more like the darkness rearranging itself, the way shadows do when a light source you can't see changes direction. Marcus pulled out his phone and checked the order. $47.12. 1 large pepperoni, 1 medium buffalo chicken, a 2-liter of Sprite. The address on the ticket read 1140 File Ohm Road, and the customer name was listed as D. Hargrove. The delivery instructions said, "Side door is fine if no answer at front." He looked to his left. There was no side door. There was a wall of climbing ivy so dense and dark green it looked black in the October night, and beyond it, just the sheer drop of the yard into a drainage ditch full of standing brown water. He looked back at the open door. This is important, because Marcus told this story himself years later, and the part he always came back to was this: he should not have been at that address at all. He had already delivered to a 1540 Vellum Road once that night, 40 minutes earlier, his first run of the shift. He had pulled up to that same house, climbed those same 3 porch steps, knocked on that same door, and a woman had answered. Middle-aged, wearing a cardigan the color of dried mustard, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She had taken the pizza, signed the receipt, handed him $4 in tip, and closed the door. He had driven back to the store, clocked the delivery, taken 2 more orders off the rack and run those. And then, on his 4th delivery of the night, the app had routed him back here. Same address, same name, same order item for item down to the 2-liter of Sprite. He'd flagged it to his manager, a heavy-set guy named Ron, who smelled perpetually of garlic knots and who had been managing this particular Dominic's for 11 years and cared deeply about 2 things: ticket times and not being asked questions after 9 p.m. Ron had looked at the duplicate order on his screen for approximately 3 seconds. System glitch. Somebody probably hit reorder by accident. Just run it, Marcus. They'll tip you again. So Marcus ran it. And now he was standing on the porch of 1540 Vellum Road at 11:47 p.m., looking into an open door that the woman in the mustard cardigan had very definitely closed 40 minutes ago, and the smell coming from inside was doing something to the back of his throat that he could not name. He knocked again. "Hello?" Delivery. From somewhere deep inside the house, from somewhere that sounded acoustically like it was farther inside than the actual dimensions of the house should allow. He heard a voice say his name, not delivery guy, not come in, his name, Marcus, said in the flat, inflectionless tone of someone reading it off a list. He took 1 step back. His left foot found the edge of the top porch step and he caught himself, heart slamming. He looked down at his foot and then back up at the door, and now there was a silhouette in the doorway. It had not walked there. It was simply there, the way objects are simply where you left them, as if it had always been standing in that doorway and he had simply failed to notice until now. The silhouette was the shape of a woman. Same approximate height and build as the woman who had answered the door 40 minutes ago, but the proportions were slightly wrong in a way Marcus could not immediately articulate. Too long in the torso, maybe. or the arms hung a fraction too low, or the head was tilted at an angle that suggested the neck wasn't holding it up so much as it was resting, tipped against an invisible surface, like a doll someone had propped. Hargrove order? Marcus said, because he was 23 years old and he needed the tips and his brain was still trying to explain this away, still running the subroutines of normalcy as hard as it could. The silhouette said his name again. Marcus, same flat tone. Then it said, "You were here before." Not a question. A statement made with the careful, deliberate quality of someone confirming a detail in a document. "Yeah," Marcus said, and his voice came out steadier than he felt. "I delivered here about 40 minutes ago. There was a duplicate order in the system, I think. I have the same order here. Pepperoni, buffalo chicken, Sprite. If you didn't place a second order, I can just take it back. Come inside," the silhouette said. "I'm good out here," Marcus said. "I just need someone to sign the receipt, or I can." "You came inside before," it said. Marcus's whole body went cold. He had not gone inside. He remembered the delivery with perfect clarity. The woman at the door, the mustard cardigan, the $4 in tip, the door closing. He had not stepped over the threshold. He was certain of it. "No," he said. "I handed the order at the door. I didn't come inside." The silhouette was quiet for 3 full seconds. In the silence, Marcus became aware of a sound coming from deeper in the house. A low rhythmic sound, almost like breathing but not quite. Too regular, too metronomic, like something mimicking the idea of breathing without understanding the purpose of it. "You should come inside," the figure said, and then it raised one arm and pointed at him, and the arm was too long. Definitively, unambiguously too long. It extended further than any human arm should, the pointing finger reaching toward him across a distance that the porch's width should have made impossible. And Marcus stopped thinking about tips. He turned around and walked to his car with the most controlled, deliberate steps he had ever taken in his life, because some ancient, mammalian part of him understood clearly that running would trigger something and he could not afford to trigger it. He got in the car. He locked the doors. He looked up at the porch and the doorway was empty. The door was closed. The porch light that had been on when he arrived was now off, and the front of 1142 Vellum Road looked exactly as it had looked on his first delivery. Quiet and ordinary and slightly tired looking the way rental houses always look, the kind of house that exists in every neighborhood in every mid-sized American city. Marcus sat in the car for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. He counted. Then he drove back to Dominic's, handed Ron both copies of the D. Hargrove receipt, the one from 40 minutes ago and the new unsigned one, and told him what had happened. Ron stared at him. Then he looked at the 2 receipts, which were identical in every detail, including the timestamp glitch that had printed the same time on both, 11,003 p.m. The second delivery had been made at 11,047 p.m. Both receipts said 11,003. "I'm not going back there," Marcus said. Ron didn't tell him to. That was the part Marcus always mentioned when he told this story. Ron, who argued about everything, who had once made a driver complete a route during an active thunderstorm, who ran his store with the flexibility of a concrete wall. Ron had looked at those 2 receipts for a long time, and then he had folded them carefully, and he had put them in his jacket pocket instead of in the till, and he had not said a single word. Marcus called the number attached to the D. Hargrove order from his personal phone the next morning. The call connected. There was no voicemail greeting, no automated message, just silence on the line, and then, after 6 seconds, that same flat, inflectionless voice saying his name. And Marcus ended the call and blocked the number and spent the next 3 nights checking the locks on his apartment door 4 times before he could sleep. He told himself it was a prank. A very elaborate, very well-executed prank. The kind of thing that required a working knowledge of the store's ordering system and a willingness to stand in a dark doorway and mess with a stranger. He told himself this for about 2 weeks, and it almost worked. And then one of the other Dominic's drivers, a college student named Priya who worked weekends, mentioned casually in the break room that she'd had a weird delivery. Duplicate order, same address both times. She'd run the second one without thinking about it. The door had been open. She'd gone inside. Priya described a living room that looked completely normal. Furniture, a rug, a television on a stand, framed photos on the wall. She'd set the pizza down on the coffee table because no one appeared to be home, and she looked at one of the framed photos. She said the photo was of a pizza delivery driver, not the store, not a family gathering with a delivery uniform in the background. A close-up, framed and hung on the wall is a portrait of a young man in a red and white Dominic's polo shirt, taken from outside through a car window, the reflection of a porch light visible in the glass. The young man in the photo was not looking at the camera. He was looking at a house, at a front door. Priya pulled it up on her phone. She had taken a picture of the picture. The young man in the framed photograph was Marcus. The photograph was dated, printed in small white numbers in the corner, the way phone cameras do. April 14th, 2022, 8 months before Marcus had ever delivered to that address. Marcus stared at Priya's phone screen for a very long time. "Did you see anyone in the house?" he asked. Priya said no. She said the house had felt empty in the specific way that houses feel when they've been empty for a long time, not the temporary emptiness of someone stepping out, but the deep settled emptiness of vacancy, of abandonment, the stillness of a place that hasn't heard a human voice in years. She had left the pizza on the coffee table and left. Marcus drove past her 2024 Vellum Road that afternoon. In the daylight, the house was ordinary, slightly run down, vinyl siding the color of old cream. The drainage ditch along the left side exactly as he remembered it. But there was a Dominic's delivery bag on the porch, red and white, the logo facing the street, sitting against the front door. It was his bag. He recognized the fraying on the left handle from when he'd snagged it on his car door 3 weeks ago. He had left it in the back of his car that night. He had driven straight back to the store without it, and he had assumed it had fallen out in the parking lot. He did not get out of the car. The bag sat on the porch of a 1340 Vellum Road, and the front door behind it was closed, and the windows of the house reflected the midday October sky in that flat, gray, particular way that makes it impossible to see what's inside. Marcus transferred to a different Dominic's location 4 days later. He works in Nashville now, has for 3 years. He does not deliver after dark, he says when you ask him about it, and he'll tell you. He's not shy about it. He'd rather you know. He says the part that stays with him isn't the silhouette or the arm or the sound from inside the house. It's the photo. Specifically, it's the date. April 14th, 2022. 8 months before he ever drove on Vellum Road, whatever was in that house had known he was coming long before he did, and Marcus has spent 3 years trying to figure out what that means. He hasn't slept more than 5 consecutive hours since October of that year, and he checks his car's back seat every single night before he gets in, without fail, without exception. Not because he thinks anything is there, because the one night he stops checking is the night it will be. Story number 2. She called from inside the box. The phone was ringing when Celeste pulled up to the house, and she almost didn't answer it because the address was right in front of her and the caller ID showed the store's number, and she figured Ron, a different Ron, a Ron at a different store in a different state, because there is apparently a Ron at every pizza store in America, was calling to add something to the order. She silenced it, grabbed the thermal bag from the back seat and walked up to the door. She knocked. The woman who answered was somewhere in her early 50s, small and sharp-featured with close-cropped silver hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She was wearing a housecoat and slippers, and she looked at Celeste with the mild, pleasant expression of someone who had been watching television and was slightly annoyed at the interruption, but not enough to be rude about it. "Pemberton?" Celeste said, checking the ticket. "That's me," the woman said. She had a thin, precise voice, the kind that belonged to a school teacher or a librarian. "Large veggie, medium cheese, extra marinara on the side." "Yes, ma'am." Celeste held out the bag and the woman took it and then signed the credit card receipt with a small, neat signature. And then she tipped $3 in cash from a small purse she'd been holding. And then she closed the door and Celeste walked back to her car. Her phone was ringing again. "Store number." She answered it this time. "Celeste?" It was Janelle, the shift supervisor, and she sounded careful in a way that people sound when they are trying not to sound alarmed. "Did you just complete the Pemberton delivery?" I'm literally walking back to my car right now. Just handed it off. Okay, Janelle said. Okay, so the Pemberton customer just called the store. She called from her landline. She wanted to know when her delivery was coming. Celeste stopped walking. She called the store, Celeste said. Just now? 2 minutes ago. She's still on hold, actually. I put her on hold to call you. She said she's been waiting 45 minutes and she's concerned because Celeste, she said she can hear someone on her porch. She said someone is outside her door and won't answer when she calls out. Celeste turned around very slowly and looked at the front of the house. The porch light was on. The front door was closed. Through the single narrow window beside the door, one of those decorative vertical windows, frosted glass with a thin clear strip down the center, she could see the vague shape of a figure standing just inside the foyer. The figure was not moving. It was just standing there, just inside the door, in the exact spot where the woman in the housecoat had been standing 30 seconds ago. Janelle, Celeste said, and she was proud of herself for how steady her voice sounded. Genuinely proud, because her heart was doing something architectural to her ribcage. Tell the customer to stay away from her front door and call 911. What? Why? What's happening? Just do it, Celeste said. Right now. She got in her car. She locked the doors. She did not take her eyes off the house. The figure in the window did not move. Celeste pulled out of the driveway and parked on the street, not leaving, just off the property. Enough distance to feel breathable, and she sat there with her hazard lights on and her phone in her hand, watching the house. Here is what Celeste knew and what she laid out for the police when they arrived 11 minutes later. She had delivered to a woman who had given her name as Pemberton, who had matched the order precisely, who had tipped $3 in cash. That woman had been in perfect possession of herself, calm, slightly annoyed, completely ordinary. There had been nothing wrong, not a single thing. Here is what the police found. The real Ms. Pemberton. Eleanor Pemberton, 61, retired pharmacist, had lived at that address for 22 years, was in her kitchen. She had been in her kitchen the entire evening. She had not answered the door. She had not, in fact, heard a knock, because she had the television on and she was in the back of the house and the kitchen was separated from the foyer by a hallway and a closed door. She had called the store from her kitchen landline when her food failed to arrive. She had heard nothing on the porch. She had seen nothing. The police searched the house. They found the thermal bag. It was in the foyer, set neatly on the floor just inside the front door. The food was inside it, still warm. The credit card receipt sign was folded on top of the bag. The front door was locked from the inside, both deadbolts. The chain was on. Eleanor Pemberton had not unlocked her door all evening. She was certain of it. Not the sort of uncertain, well, maybe I did that people offer when they're trying to be helpful. Certain, the kind of certain that comes from routine. She locked up at 8 p.m. every night, checked the deadbolts twice, put the chain on. It was a ritual she'd kept for 15 years, since a neighbor's break-in had shaken the whole street. The receipt was signed. The signature matched her own. The police confirmed this later with a handwriting comparison. Matched her own signature with high confidence. Celeste described the woman at the door to a sketch artist the following week. She described her in detail because Celeste had that kind of memory. She'd been an art minor for 2 semesters before dropping out, and she'd spent years training herself to really look at people, to notice the specific things that made a face, the silver hair, the sharp features, the reading glasses on the beaded chain, the exact color of the house coat, which was a faded blue-green she described as sea foam that had been washed too many times. Eleanor Pemberton sat across the table from the sketch artist's completed work and said nothing for a very long time. Then she said, "That's my mother." Her mother had been dead for 9 years. The reading glasses on the beaded chain, she recognized those specifically. She had given them to her mother as a birthday gift in 2004, and they had been buried with her, because Eleanor had specifically requested it, because her mother had never been without them. Celeste has delivered pizza for 3 years since that night. She still delivers pizza. What else is she going to do? She has bills. She has a car payment. She needs the tips, but she has a rule now, one she keeps without exception. If a customer opens the door before she knocks, she leaves the food on the porch, marks the delivery complete in the app, and drives away without speaking to anyone. She has had to use that rule 4 times. She doesn't think about what that means specifically. She says she can't afford to, but she told this story to her cousin, who told it to a friend who posted it in a Reddit thread about delivery horror. And when someone in the comments asked Celeste if she'd ever gone back to Eleanor Pemberton's street, she said yes, once. She drove past a month after it happened, in the daytime, just to look at the house in normal light and remind herself that it was just a house. There was a beaded chain hanging on the front door, no glasses attached to it. Just the chain, looped over the door handle, the kind of pale iridescent beads you'd find in a craft store in the mid-90s, moving slightly in a wind that Celeste, standing outside the car, could not feel on her skin. Eleanor Pemberton's number was disconnected when Celeste tried to call it that evening. The listing had been taken down. According to a neighbor who answered when Celeste knocked, Eleanor had moved out the previous week. Left in a hurry, the neighbor said. Left most of her furniture, left her car in the driveway for her nephew to come get. Just packed 2 suitcases and called a cab. Did she say where she was going? Celeste asked. The neighbor thought about it. She said she was going somewhere with no doors, she said, and offered nothing further, because she didn't know what that meant either. And Celeste drove home in the particular silence that settles on you when you understand something happened that cannot be explained in any framework you currently have available, and you are going to have to either build a new framework or stop thinking about it entirely. She still hasn't decided which. Story number 3, The Regulars, 88 Heat, Dunmore Street. Devin had delivered to 88 Dunmore Street so many times he knew the order by heart before he even looked at the ticket. Every Tuesday and Friday night, like clockwork, 2 large pepperoni pizzas, an order of cheesy bread, a 2-liter of Coke. The name on the account was Bellamy. He'd never met Mr. or Mrs. Bellamy. Whoever lived at 88 Dunmore always paid online, always left a 15% tip already loaded on the card, and answered the door as quickly as if they'd been standing behind it waiting. Different people sometimes, or so Devin had thought at first. But after a few months he'd started to notice that it was always the same person. A man, somewhere in his mid-40s, medium height, a little soft around the middle, dark hair going gray at the temples. Nice enough, always in what looked like pajama pants and a plain gray t-shirt, the same outfit every single time. Always said, "Thanks, man," in the same slightly tired, slightly distracted way, always took the boxes and closed the door without looking at the receipt. Devin had been delivering to 88 Dunmore for almost a year when the first thing happened. He pulled up on a Friday night in February, walked up the path, knocked. The door opened. The man was there, same pajama pants, same gray shirt, same distracted "thanks, man." He took the boxes. Devin turned to go and heard the man's voice again behind him. "Hey." Devin turned back. The man was standing in the open doorway, holding the pizza boxes, looking at Devin with an expression Devin had never seen on him before. Not distracted, not tired, focused, sharply, unsettlingly focused, like a man who had just heard something in another room and was trying to determine what it was. "Have I met you before?" the man asked. Devin almost laughed. "I've been delivering here for about a year," he said. "Every Tuesday and Friday." The man stared at him. "No," he said. "You haven't." Devin figured the guy was just out of it. Maybe he was one of those people who genuinely didn't pay attention to delivery drivers, who processed them as an anonymous service function rather than an individual. He'd encountered that before. It didn't bother him. "Yeah, man, I have. Pretty much every week. You've got 2 large pepperonis down to a science." The man looked at the boxes in his hands. He looked back at Devin. "I've never ordered pizza in my life," he said. Devin drove back to the store and looked up the account history for the Bellamy order at 88 Dunmore Street. There were 83 orders on that account going back to March of the previous year. Every Tuesday and every Friday, without a single exception. The card on file belonged to a Paul Bellamy. Address 88 Dunmore Street. Phone number with a local area code. He called the number. The man answered. "This is Devin from Dominic's. I just delivered to your house and I wanted to make sure everything was..." I told you, the man said. I've never ordered pizza. Sir, there are 83 orders on your account. 2 large pepperoni every. I don't have an account, Paul Bellamy said. I don't eat pizza. I'm lactose intolerant. A pause. Who gave you this number? It's the number on the account. A longer pause. What account? Devon went back through the store's records the next day with his manager. 83 orders over 41 weeks, all paid on a credit card in Paul Bellamy's name. All delivered to 88 Dunmore Street. All signed off as completed. Devon had personally made 61 of those deliveries. He remembered them. He remembered the man. Same gray shirt, same pajama pants, same thanks man, 61 times. Paul Bellamy showed Devon his credit card statement. There were no charges from Dominic's, not one. 41 weeks of twice-weekly orders, over $2,000 in food, and not a single charge appeared on the card that had supposedly been paying for them. The store had the payment receipts, paid in full, every order. No discrepancies, no chargebacks, no flags. Devon asked Paul Bellamy a question that he said he thought about for a long time before asking, because it seemed crazy. He asked, had Bellamy noticed anything unusual in his house over the past 10 months? Anything missing, anything moved, any sense that someone had been inside? Bellamy didn't laugh at the question. Devon thought later that was significant. He should have laughed. It was a strange question. But instead, Bellamy got very still and looked at the floor for a moment and said yes, actually, there had been something. He'd noticed it in April and he'd been attributing it to stress, to overwork. He wasn't sleeping well. He was a project manager at a software firm. Long hours, he'd been under real pressure. What he'd noticed was this: every Tuesday and Friday morning, he woke up feeling full, not just not hungry, full, specifically, in the way he felt after eating a large meal. And he had been losing track of his Tuesday and Friday evenings, not in a dramatic way, not in a blackout way. Just, he'd sit down on the couch at 7 p.m. to watch something, and the next thing he knew it was 11 and he was going to bed. He'd assumed he was falling asleep in front of the TV. He'd assumed it was the exhaustion. Devon asked him to check his trash. They went to the kitchen together and Devon opened the cabinet under the sink where Bellamy kept the trash can, and there were pizza boxes in it, 6 of them, flattened and stacked neatly, the Dominic's logo printed on the top. Bellamy stared at them. He had not put them there. He lived alone. He had not ordered pizza. He said again softly, in the voice of someone watching a certainty disintegrate, lactose intolerant. He pulled out the boxes one by one and looked at them, and Devon watched his face go through a sequence of expressions that he has described since as the worst thing he witnessed in the entire experience, because it was so clearly a person watching their understanding of their own life come apart. On the bottom of the last box, written in black marker in a handwriting that Devon did not recognize from any of the 61 receipts the man had signed, were 2 words: "You're welcome." Devon called the number on the Bellamy account one more time that night from his car, parked outside the store. It rang twice. Then the call connected to silence, and from the silence came a sound that Devon struggled to describe but consistently described the same way: chewing, rhythmic, wet chewing. The sound of someone eating without hurry, without self-consciousness. The sound of someone very comfortable in a specific chair eating their food in the familiar dark of their own home. Devon hung up and deleted the contact. Paul Bellamy had his locks changed the following morning. He had a security system installed. He slept in a hotel for a week. He never had another unexplained full feeling on a Tuesday or Friday. He doesn't know what was eating in his kitchen on those nights, sitting in the dark on his couch in his pajamas, collecting his food from his own front door. Devon still runs that route. He still passes 88 Dunmore every Tuesday and Friday. He doesn't stop. The account was deleted from the system at his request, but 3 months after all of this, a new account appeared. Same address, different name, D. Ellery. Same order, 2 large pepperoni, cheesy bread, Coke. Devon's manager assigned it to a different driver. That driver quit after 2 deliveries. He wouldn't say specifically why. but his coworkers noticed that after his second delivery to 88 Dunmore, he started checking the back seat of his car before every shift, and he started keeping his phone at maximum brightness at all times, and he ate no more than once a day, refusing to eat anything he hadn't prepared himself, refusing to eat anything that had been in a place he hadn't personally overseen. As if the specific horror of that house was not the unknown occupant, but what the unknown occupant had been doing with the food, with the ritual of eating, with the intimate, private, bodily act of being fed. Devon understood that without being told. Some stories don't scare you with what they show you. They scare you with the question you can't stop asking after: who was sitting in that man's house? Who was wearing his clothes in the dark? Who was opening that door and saying, "Thanks, man," in his voice, and eating in his kitchen and going through the comfortable domestic motions of his life, Tuesday and Friday, for 41 weeks? And more disturbingly, what did it feel like? What did it feel like to wear that? Devon thinks about that more than he should. Late at night specifically, when the TV is on low and he's sitting on his couch in the specific warm stupor that comes just before sleep, and the room is dark and comfortable and his belly is full, and for just a moment, for just the briefest, most horrible moment, he cannot completely remember eating dinner. Story number 4, Apartment 7B. The building at 1400 Casson Avenue in Raleigh, North Carolina had 6 floors. Imani knew this because the elevator buttons went 1 through 6, because the stairwell landings were labeled 1 through 6, and because she had been delivering to this building for 8 months and had navigated every floor on various occasions and had never encountered anything other than 6. The building was called the Casson, and it was a mid-range apartment complex, nothing special, 64 units, mostly young professionals, the kind of place that ordered a lot of Thai food and sushi and, on Fridays specifically, a lot of pizza. The order that night was for Apartment 7B. The customer name was Harlan Voss. The order was simple: 1 large mushroom and onion, 1 small cheese, breadsticks. Imani stared at the delivery address in the app for a full 30 seconds before accepting the order. Apartment 7B, 1400 Casson Avenue. She called the store. "Hey, this Voss order. It says Apartment 7B. Is there a second building? Like a 7B in a different part of the complex?" Her dispatcher checked. "No, 1 building at that address. The apartment number was 7B. The building only has 6 floors," Imani said. Customer entered it as 7B, the dispatcher said in the tone of someone who has a queue backing up and does not have bandwidth for architectural paradoxes. "Just deliver to 6B if 7B doesn't exist." Customer probably made a typo. Imani drove to the Casson and went to 6B. She knocked. A man in his 30s with a toddler on his hip answered. He looked at her bag with genuine confusion. He had not ordered pizza. He did not know anyone named Harlan Voss. He was pretty sure the upstairs neighbor was a single woman named Cortez. No, he did not think she had ordered pizza either. Imani tried calling the number attached to the order. It rang several times and connected to a voicemail that said simply, "Leave a message for 7B," and then beeped. She left a message explaining the situation and went back to the elevator. She pressed 6, her intention being to knock on 6B one more time in case she had the wrong door. But when the elevator opened, she stepped out into a hallway she did not recognize. The hallway was longer than it should have been. The building's floor plan, from her 8 months of deliveries, was simple. Elevator at center, hallway extending left and right, 4 units on each side, fire exit at each end. She knew this the way she knew her own apartment layout. By bone, by reflex. This hallway was longer, not by a little. The doors on either side receded into a distance that didn't match the building's footprint. And the carpet, the building had gray industrial carpet on every floor. She'd walked it hundreds of times, was different here, darker, a deep reddish brown that she had not selected as a category for carpet color in her brain until the moment she noticed it wasn't gray. The overhead lights were the same fluorescent fixtures as the rest of the building, but they were dimmer and they buzzed in the specific key that sets teeth on edge, the kind of electrical hum that means something in the wiring is wrong. And at the far end of the hallway, past a run of doors that extended further than the building's outer walls should allow, there was a door marked 7B. Imani stood in the elevator doorway with her hand flat against the door to keep it from closing and looked at the hallway, and then looked at the elevator panel behind her. The button she had pressed was labeled SIX. The number 6 was right there, physically illuminated, and the elevator had stopped where it was programmed to stop. She called the store back. "I need you to listen to me," she said. "The building has a 7th floor." "It doesn't," the dispatcher said. "I'm looking at the listing right now. 6 floors, 64 units." "I'm standing on it," Imani said. She walked toward door 7B. She walked slowly, counting her steps, trying to maintain some empirical grip on the situation. 14 steps from the elevator to the door. In a building with the footprint of the cassone, those 14 steps would have taken her through an exterior wall. She had not passed through any wall. She was standing in an interior hallway with fluorescent lights and reddish carpet and a door in front of her. She knocked. The door opened in exactly the time it takes a person to cross a room and turn a handle. Not immediately, not after a long wait, but in the measured, natural time of someone who heard the knock, stood up and came to answer it, which meant someone had been in there, waiting in a room that did not exist for a delivery they had placed to an address that could not receive deliveries. The man in the doorway was somewhere between 40 and 60. It was difficult to be more specific because his face had the quality of a face in a photograph, recognizable as a face, all the correct components present and in the correct arrangement, but somehow not entirely convincing, not deformed, not wrong technically, just not quite, like a very good reconstruction of a face from a description rather than from a person. He looked at Imani's delivery bag. "Mushroom and onion," he said. "Small cheese. Breadsticks." "That's right," Imani said. "Are you Harlan Voss?" "That's right," he said, in the exact cadence she had just used to answer him, and something about that mirroring registered in her body before her brain processed it. A full-body revulsion, the kind that precedes articulation. She handed him the bag. He handed her a folded receipt. She had not given him a receipt to sign. She had not printed one. The receipt was still in her thermal bag, and a $20 bill. "Change is yours," he said. The order was $31.40. He had given her a 20 and a folded receipt. Before she could work out the math, he had closed the door. Imani stood in the reddish-brown hallway and unfolded the receipt. It was a Dominic's receipt, the correct format, the correct thermal paper. The order was listed correctly. The address at the top said 1400 Casson Avenue, apartment 7B, and the timestamp said 11:58 p.m. It was 11:43. She had arrived at the building at 11:39. The receipt was timestamped 15 minutes in the future. She went back to the elevator. She pressed 1, rode down to the lobby, and walked out of the building and stood on the sidewalk in the November air and called her sister, who was awake because she worked night shifts at a hospital, and she described what had happened in a voice that she later described as the voice I use when I am trying not to cry. Her sister said, "I'm Annie. Listen to me. What floor did the elevator open on?" 6, Imani said. "And you saw a hallway that was different, and a door, and a man." "Yes." "Did the elevator actually move? Did you feel it go up?" Imani thought about it. She had pressed the button. The doors had closed. There had been the brief specific vibration of an elevator in motion. She had assumed she was going up. She had pressed 6, the highest floor, and the elevator had moved. She went back inside. She went to the elevator. She pressed 6 again. The elevator moved. She stepped out. Gray carpet, correctly proportioned hallway, exactly as she had known it for 8 months. She checked her delivery bag. The food was gone. The bag was empty. She looked at the receipt in her hand. The timestamp now said 11:44. It had been 11:58 a moment ago. The ink looked slightly faded, as if it were old, as if it had been handled many times. She looked at the $20 bill. It was a $20 bill. It was, as far as she could tell, a completely normal $20 bill. She still has it. She has never spent it. She says she has no good reason for that, except that it doesn't feel like her money, and spending it feels like accepting something from 7B, and she is not ready to do that. Imani is 28 years old. She has since moved to a different city, found work in a fulfillment center, and does not do delivery anymore. She says the job itself didn't break her. What broker was calling Dominic's the next morning and asking her manager to look up the Harlan Voss account and delete it, and her manager saying, after a pause, in a careful voice, that there was no Harlan Voss account. There was no order from 1400 Casson Avenue the previous night. The ticket that had appeared in the app had no record in the system, no record of the order, no record of the payment, no record of the delivery. The dispatch log showed her delivering 2 orders that night. The 7B run was not one of them. There is no record of Harlan Voss in the Raleigh area. There is no Unit 7B at 1400 Casson Avenue. There is no 7th floor. The building management confirmed, when Imani called them from her car in the parking lot that morning, that the building had never had a 7th floor. Built in 2007, 6 floors, 64 units, never modified, never expanded. Imani asked if anyone else had ever reported anything unusual about the elevator. The building manager said, "Why are you asking about the elevator?" And when Imani explained, there was a silence that lasted long enough that she thought the call had dropped. Then the manager said, carefully, "The way you say things to people you're not sure are entirely stable. Ma'am, I'm going to give you the number of the property management company, and I want you to speak to them, because this isn't the first time we've gotten a call like this." She never called the property management company. She's thought about it many times. But there's a version of that call that ends with information, and there's a version that ends with something being confirmed that should rather remain unconfirmed, and she has not yet decided which version she wants. She still has the $20 bill. She keeps it in an envelope in her nightstand drawer. She says sometimes in the morning, when she opens the drawer for something else, the bill is slightly warmer than the other things in the drawer, in the way that something is warm when it has recently been held. Story number 5. What Tyler saw through the window. Tyler had been a delivery driver for 2 years when he made the mistake of arriving 8 minutes early. Just 8 minutes. He was 21 and efficient, and he had mapped the route to 6 Crestview Lane, Harmon, Ohio, and had clocked his travel time correctly, and the only thing that had gone wrong was that traffic on the 31 bypass had been lighter than expected at 9:40 p.m. on a Thursday in March. And so he arrived at the address with the pizza still registering hot in the bag and with 8 minutes left before the customer's app would show the delivery as on time. He sat in the car for 3 minutes, which is what he usually did when he was early, to avoid the awkward thing where people feel rushed. He scrolled his phone. He checked the order ticket. Then he looked up at the house. The house at 6 Crestview Lane was a 2-story colonial, nice by Harmon standards, well-maintained, the kind of house where the driveway got sealed every few years and the gutters were cleaned. The customer name was Whitfield, 1 large supreme garlic knots. The porch light was on, and through the front window, a large picture window that looked into what was evidently the living room, Tyler could see the warm yellow light of a room in use. He was not trying to look through the window, he was just looking at the house, waiting. But the picture window was large and unobstructed by curtains, and what Tyler saw in the 3 minutes before he went to the door rearranged something in him that has not been rearranged back. There were 4 people in the living room. A man and a woman on the couch, the Whitfields, Tyler would come to understand, and 2 other people seated in chairs. The 2 people in the chairs were dressed oddly for a casual Thursday evening. Heavy clothing, dark, layered, the kind of formless bulk that obscures body shape entirely. Their faces were not visible from Tyler's angle. All 4 appeared to be engaged in conversation. The Whitfields were doing most of the talking. The 2 figures in the chairs were not moving in any way that Tyler could detect. This was not, by itself, alarming. People have guests. People sit very still sometimes. What made Tyler's mouth go dry was the moment when Mr. Whitfield, the man on the couch, heavy-set, wearing a flannel shirt, reached over to the end table, picked up what appeared to be a glass of water, and held it out toward the figure in the nearest chair. The figure did not take it. Whitfield held it extended for a count of 5, 10, 15 seconds, arm fully extended, glass offered. His wife continued talking. The other figure in the far chair had not moved at all. Then the near figure moved its head, slowly, a degrees by degree rotation that brought its face, for the first time, toward the window. Tyler saw the face for approximately half a second. He has been asked to describe it many times and his description has been consistent. It was a face with all the correct components, but the skin was the wrong color. Not pale, not dark. Wrong. A grayish brown that has no business being the color of living human skin. The color of ground that hasn't seen rain in a long time. The color of something dried out, something desiccated, and the eyes did not catch the light. Every other surface in that lit room caught the warm lamplight and threw it back. The eyes of the figure in the chair absorbed it. They were the only lightless points in the room. Tyler walked to the front door and knocked. He does not know why. He has examined this decision at length. He thinks it was the same mechanism that makes you look at a car accident as you drive past, that makes you scroll down even though the content is disturbing you, the compulsive forward motion of a mind that has been hooked on something it cannot process. He needed more information. He needed to understand what he'd seen, and the only move available was to knock on the door. Mr. Whitfield answered. He was exactly as he'd appeared through the window, heavy-set, flannel shirt, the flushed, affable face of a man who coaches Little League and argues about the refs. Nothing wrong with him, nothing off. He looked at the pizza bag and said, "Oh great, finally," and called back into the house, "Sherry, pizza's here." Tyler handed over the bag. Whitfield signed the receipt and tipped $6. He was already turning back inside when Tyler heard himself ask, "You have company tonight?" Whitfield looked back at him. "Sorry, I could see through the window, looked like you had guests." "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "No guests," Whitfield said pleasantly. "Just me and my wife tonight," and he closed the door. Tyler stood on the porch. Through the picture window, now clearly visible from this angle and distance, he could see the living room. Mr. Whitfield was crossing it toward the couch, where his wife sat. The room was exactly as he'd seen it through the car window. Couch, end tables, lamp, rug, television, 2 empty chairs. They were positioned in the specific way chairs get positioned when they've been used. Slightly turned, slightly out from the wall, the way you leave furniture when you've been sitting in it. Not the way furniture gets left when it was never sat in, used, recently vacated. Tyler walked back to his car. He drove to the end of the street and sat there for a while. He called his girlfriend and told her what he'd seen, and she said, "That's creepy, babe, come home." And he said he would. Instead, he sat at the end of Crestview Lane and watched the house for 20 minutes. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. The porch light stayed on. The living room light stayed on. No movement visible through the window. Then, at the 18-minute mark, both lights went off simultaneously and the house went completely dark and stayed dark. Tyler drove home. He did not sleep. In the morning, he drove past 6 Crestview Lane on his way to the store, and the house looked exactly the same as it had the night before, quiet and ordinary and well-maintained. He has since told this story to several people who asked the obvious question, what did he think was in those chairs? What did he think the figures were? He says he has a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is that he doesn't know. The long answer is that the thing that disturbs him most is not the grayish skin or the lightless eyes or the disappearance. It's the glass of water. The way Whitfield offered it, calmly, without urgency, as part of the evening's routine, in the way you offer a drink to a guest who has been in your home enough times to be comfortable there, not scared of them, not in any visible distress. Offering water to something in a dark coat that sat in a chair in the lamplight of his ordinary living room with eyes that ate the light and gave nothing back. Whatever they were, the Whitfields knew them, were comfortable with them, were hosting them, and Tyler has never been able to decide which interpretation of that is more frightening, that the Whitfields knew what they were hosting, or that they didn't. Story number 6, the Noche de the box. Nobody named Ferreira had ordered a pizza. That was the first problem. Gus had been dispatched to 22 Aldermere Drive at 10:15 p.m. on a Saturday night in July, and the ticket had a name. Ferreira, M., and an order. 1 medium sausage and pepper, 1 order of fried dough, and a cash payment note that said, "Customer will have correct change." This was not unusual. What was unusual was that when Gus pulled up to 22 Aldermere Drive, the house was dark. Not just unlit, dark in the specific way that suggests extended vacancy, the front walk unswept, a moving sale sticker still on the mailbox from a departure that had clearly happened months ago, the flower beds reduced to dried stems. This was not a house where someone was home waiting for pizza. Gus tried the number attached to the order. It rang 8 times and cut to silence. Not voicemail, just silence, and then the automated carrier message telling him the call could not be completed. He put the delivery in as attempted, took a photo of the dark house as documentation, and drove back toward the main road. He had 2 more orders to run, and his pizza was hot, and Saturday nights were for moving fast. He got 2 blocks away when his phone buzzed. A new message on the delivery app from the Ferreira account, "Sorry, was in the backyard. Come to the side gate." Gus pulled over and looked at this message for a long moment. He looked at the photo he had just taken of the house, every window dark, no cars in the driveway, the moving sale sticker on the mailbox. He typed back, "Sure, be right there." He drove back. He told himself later that it was because he needed the cash transaction to close out the order. You can't mark a cash order complete without the payment, and that explanation is reasonable enough, and also not the whole truth. The whole truth, Gus said, was that he'd been doing this job for 3 years and he'd gotten a feel for it, and the message felt real in a way that overrode what his eyes had told him about the house. The spelling, the slight apology, the specific detail of the backyard. It felt like a real person in a real house who had been pulling weeds or something and hadn't heard the knock. He wanted it to be that. He parked in front of 22 Aldermere and got out with the order bag. The side gate was a wooden privacy fence gate on the left side of the house, currently latched but not padlocked. He called out, "Hello, Ferreira?" "Come through," said a voice from the other side of the fence. It was a woman's voice, calm, normal. Gus opened the gate and walked through. The backyard was empty. Not just person empty, fully empty. No patio furniture, no garden, no shed, no evidence that this yard had been used for anything other than growing grass, which it was still doing despite the vacancy. In that indifferent way that living things continue their processes regardless of what humans do or don't do. The grass was knee-high in places. The yard extended to a back fence beyond which was a drainage easement, and beyond that, more houses. Gus said, "Hello?" Nobody answered. Nobody was in the yard. He was completely alone. He stood there for a moment with the pizza bag, and then he noticed the table. It was the only piece of anything in the whole backyard, a small metal bistro table, the cheap kind, round, set in the approximate center of the yard. And on the table was a $20 bill and a folded piece of paper. He walked to the table. He picked up the 20. He picked up the paper. It was a note, handwritten, in a neat and deliberate hand on what looked like the inside of a pizza box flap, as if whoever wrote it had torn the cardboard from the delivery packaging. The handwriting was careful, the letters slightly too uniform, the way someone writes when they're copying something rather than composing it. It said, "Do not open the box. Set it on the table. Take the 20. Go back to the road and do not look at the house from outside. Tell them the order was wrong when you get back. This is important. Do not tell anyone at the store what you found here. This is also important. There are 14 orders in their system from this address going back 4 months. You have run 6 of them. Please stop accepting orders for this address. We know you haven't been the only driver. Please find the others and tell them the same thing. None of you should come back here. We are sorry this involved you." Gus stood in the knee-high grass of the empty backyard of the empty house at 22 Aldermere Drive, holding a note written on cardboard in careful handwriting that used the plural we and had demonstrated specific knowledge of his personal delivery history, and he experienced what he later described as a complete temporary shutdown of his analytical faculties, a sort of standing still of thought, like a computer freezing. Then he put the pizza box on the table. He took the 20. He walked back through the side gate and latched it and walked to his car without looking at the house. He marked the delivery complete. He told the store the order had been wrong when he got back. He spent the next week going through the delivery logs, covertly during slow periods, identifying the other 5 drivers who had run orders to 22 Aldermere Drive over the preceding 4 months. He spoke to each of them privately. 4 of them described the same experience: empty, dark house, Message about the backyard. Table in the grass. Note. $20. Pizza box. The notes were not all identical. Each was different, tailored. Each mentioned specific details of the driver's history, their other deliveries. In one case, a personal detail that the driver said no one could have gotten from the delivery records alone. The fifth driver Gus spoke to, a young woman named Soledad, who had been with the store for 6 weeks and had run 2 of the Aldermere orders, did not describe the same experience. She said she had delivered to a family. Normal house, lights on, family at the door. A woman and 2 children. She'd handed the order to the woman, gotten a tip, left. Nothing unusual. Were the children? Were they okay? Gus asked. Did they seem? They were kids, Soledad said. Little ones. Like 5 and 7, something like that. They were standing behind their mom. They were staring at me. Staring how? Soledad thought about it. Like they recognized me, she said. Which is weird because I'd never been there. But the way they were looking at me, it wasn't curious. It was like when you see someone you know and you're surprised to see them there. That kind of look, that specific kind of recognition. Gus thought about the note. We are sorry this involved you. The plural we, 4 drivers receiving warnings, 1 driver receiving a family, children who recognized a woman they'd never met. He drove past 22 Aldermere Drive a month later. The moving sales sticker was still on the mailbox. The house was still dark. The front walk was still unswept. The grass in the front yard was longer. In the driveway, there was a Dominic's delivery bag. Sitting precisely in the center of the driveway, upright, the red and white logo facing the street. It was not a bag from Gus's store. The logo was slightly different, older design, the version that Dominic's had phased out in 2019. A bag that should not exist anymore, or should exist only at the bottom of a storage closet somewhere. Gus reported the address to his manager and asked to be excluded from any future orders to that location. His manager agreed without asking why, which Gus took to mean that this was not, at the management level, a surprise. The orders from Ferreira at 22 Aldermere continued to appear in the system periodically. Gus does not know who runs them now. He asks around sometimes, carefully, indirectly, trying to figure out which of his coworkers has been to that backyard. He can usually tell within a few shifts. It changes something in the way a person carries themselves. A new frequency of checking over the shoulder. A reluctance to accept orders in that zip code. A habit of leaving the delivery bag in the back seat unlocked, within easy reach, as if prepared at any moment to put something on a table and walk away. The note said they were sorry it involved him. He spent a long time thinking about who they are and what they're sorry for, and whether the apology was meant for the drivers or for someone else entirely. Some third party he hasn't thought to look for yet. He hasn't found an answer that satisfies. He might never find one. He is not certain he wants to. Story number 7. The face he recognizes. Nadia had been delivering for Costello's for 11 months when she pulled up to the address on her last run of the night, 12:47 a.m. on a Sunday, and recognized the man standing in the front yard. Not recognized him the way you recognize a regular customer, recognized him the way you recognize someone from a context that should be impossible. The specific visceral shock of seeing the face somewhere it cannot be. She recognized him because he was dead. His name was Daniel Ochoa, and he had worked at Costello's from March to September of the previous year. One of the night drivers, 26 years old, the kind of easy, reliable coworker who didn't generate stories. He'd moved away in September. Or so everyone thought. He'd simply stopped showing up, left a voicemail with the manager saying he was relocating to Phoenix, picked up his last check in person, said goodbye to a couple of people. Normal enough departure. Nobody thought twice about it. In December, his family had filed a missing persons report. He had never arrived in Phoenix. His Phoenix contact, a college friend he'd planned to stay with, had never heard from him after September 14th. His car had been found at a rest stop on I-40 in New Mexico in November. Keys in the ignition, driver's door open, a Costello's pizza bag in the back seat, still carrying the faint smell of oregano and cardboard. No signs of struggle, no Daniel. The restaurant had been quietly buzzing about this since January. It was February now. Nobody talked about it directly, in the way that people in service jobs don't talk directly about the hard things, but it was present in the air. Nadia knew all of this. She had known Daniel reasonably well, in the limited way of co-workers on opposite schedules, and she had been upset about his disappearance in the specific way that disappearances upset people when they can't reconcile them with the person they knew. And now he was standing in the front yard of 33 Holt Avenue in Raleigh, North Carolina at 12:47 a.m. on a Sunday in February, 600 miles from where his car had been found, wearing a Costello's uniform shirt. He was standing very still, facing the street, facing her car. Nadia sat in the car with the engine running and her hands flat on her steering wheel and her heart doing things to her chest that she could feel in her throat. She looked at the man. The yard was dark, lit only by a streetlight half a block away, but the light was enough. Same build, same dark hair, same face, same Costello's red and white uniform, or a shirt that was identical to it, the name embroidered on the chest, though the distance and light made the name unreadable. She told herself she was wrong. She told herself it was a coincidence of physical similarity, that the uniform was a coincidence. Costello's wasn't the only pizzeria with a red and white uniform. She told herself all of this and she sat in the car for 90 seconds and then she grabbed the delivery bag and got out of the car. Because she was a person who needed the tips and she also needed to know. She walked up the front path. The man in the yard watched her come. He didn't turn toward her. He was already facing her direction. He just watched, with the same quality of stillness she had noticed from the car, a stillness that was not relaxed. It was the stillness of held tension, the stillness of waiting. She got close enough to read the embroidery on the shirt. Danielle. She stopped walking. Daniel, she said, because she had to say something and her brain had dispensed with pleasantries. Hey, Nadia, he said. His voice was wrong. Not unrecognizable. It was his voice, but wrong the way a recording of a voice is wrong. The tiny flatness that comes from playback rather than production, sound reproduced rather than created. It was Daniel's voice playing from something that understood the concept of his voice without fully being the thing that made it. Daniel, where have you been? She said. Your family. Do you know? You've been missing since I'm not missing, he said. Your car was found in New Mexico. Your family filed. I'm not missing, he said again, with the patient repetition of someone correcting a factual error. I'm here. Where have you been? Nadia said again. Her voice had begun to shake, and she was not trying to stop it from shaking because all of her available resources were being used to stay standing in this yard and look at this man and process the situation. Come inside, he said. I have a delivery, she said. I know, he said. I ordered it. She looked down at the ticket in her hand. The name on the order was Ochoa. She had not, in processing the delivery, connected the name to anyone she knew. Ochoa was not an unusual name. But there it was. D. Ochoa. 338. Holt Avenue. One large sausage mushroom, hot wings, a 2-liter, the same thing Daniel used to order every Friday night at the store when they'd put in employee orders during slow periods. The exact same thing. She had watched him order it dozens of times. I'm not coming inside, Nadia said. He looked at her, the expression on his face, and this is the part that Nadia has said in every retelling, is the part she thinks about every single day, was not hostile, not threatening, not whatever she would have expected from a face in the dark yard at midnight. It was sad, genuinely, unmistakably, deeply sad. The expression of someone watching you make a choice they wish you weren't making because they know what it means. Okay, he said, and the sadness in the word was so complete that it physically hurt to hear, a sting behind the eyes. Nadia held the delivery bag out. He took it. His hand was cold. She felt the temperature differential even through the bag handle, even in the February night air, a coldness that was notable and wrong for a person standing in the open air, in a lined uniform shirt, who should have been radiating any kind of body heat at all. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, Tell them I'm fine. Tell who? She said. Your family. Are you... Daniel? Are you okay? Tell them I'm fine, he said again. Tell them I'm exactly where I need to be. He turned and walked into the house. The front door was closed. He did not open it. He walked toward it, and then he was simply not in the yard anymore, and the door remained closed, and the front of 38 Holt Avenue was empty and dark. Nadia stood in the yard for a long time. Then she walked back to her car and sat in it and did not drive. She sat in the car outside 38 Holt Avenue for 40 minutes, watching the house, and at no point did any light come on inside, and at no point did any movement appear in any window, and the door did not open again. She called the police. She explained as coherently as she could manage that she believed she had just made contact with a missing person. The officer who responded took her statement without visible skepticism, which she found unnerving, and looked up 388 Holt Avenue in the system, and told her that the address had been vacant and for sale since October. The listing real estate agent confirmed no one had been inside since the last showing in November. The delivery app showed the Ochoa order as paid, completed, and reviewed. The review had been left at 1 a.m., 16 minutes after Nadia had last seen the man in the yard. The review said, "Perfect delivery as always. Nadia is the best driver, 5 stars." Nadia quit her job the following Monday. She drove to Daniel's mother's house in Garner, rang the bell, and when the door opened she said, "He told me to tell you he's fine." She did not explain further because she did not know what further explanation would sound like, and she watched Daniel's mother's face go through something that she cannot describe except to say that it was not entirely surprised. That was the part that has stayed with her. The not entirely surprised, as if some part of Daniel's mother already knew something, had received some information or impression that she hadn't been able to name until Nadia's words gave it a name. His mother said, "Did he look okay?" Nadia thought about the sadness in his face, the cold hand, the way he had walked into a closed door, the way his voice had sounded like a reproduction of itself. He looked exactly like himself, she said. It was the most honest answer she had access to. She has not delivered pizza since. She works in a call center now, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., in a building with no front yard, and she has a rule about not working nights that her employer respects without knowing why. She checks, every few months, the missing persons database for Daniel Ochoa's name. The entry is still there, still listed as missing as of September 14th. She thinks about the expression on his face sometimes, the sadness, the specific quality of someone watching you make a choice they wish you weren't making because they understand what it costs. She thinks about what it means that he already knew she wouldn't come inside, that he had expected the answer before she gave it, that he had not tried to persuade her, had not argued, had simply accepted her refusal with the resignation of someone who had made peace with a very long time of knocking on doors and watching people not come in. She wonders sometimes how long he's been doing it. How many drivers have pulled up to whatever address he's at? How many have said no? She wonders, specifically, what happens to the ones who say yes. She expects she'll wonder that for the rest of her life.